Hello and welcome to the latest podcast from the Blood Red channel. I'm Matt Addison, and on this episode of the show, I'm joined by the excellent Tom Midler from the Other Bundesliga podcast. We'll be looking into some Red Bull Salzburg and Liverpool links, starting with Takumi Minamino, a player that so many had so much hope for when he moved from Austria to Anfield 18 months or so ago, but just hasn't quite clicked for him at Liverpool just yet. We'll then move on to Patson Daka, a forward at Red Bull Salzburg now, who Liverpool are being linked with. With 54 goals in 82 league games for Salzburg, you can certainly see why. We started though by having a look at the reasons for Minamino's struggles and had a chat in general really about the Japanese forward and his time as a Liverpool player so far. We might as well start with Takumi Minamino. It's not quite worked for him at Liverpool so far, but you'll have seen him a fair bit at Salzburg. He's obviously a better player than what Liverpool fans have seen so far.
Yeah, he really caught the eye in his time at Salzburg. He was a great player to watch, and we were all pretty happy to see him get a big move, especially to a club like Liverpool, and to see what he can do in the Premier League. Obviously, it hasn't worked out seamlessly since then, but I still think there's a lot of potential to be unlocked with Minamino in England.
Yeah, I think it was 64 goals, 44 assists when he was over in Austria with Salzburg. I mean, those numbers in around about 200 games, that's really, really good. Those are seriously good numbers. It's similar for Japan as well. You can kind of see why Liverpool were interested in him.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's good that you mentioned that his stats are relatively similar for Japan, because actually it's the same in Austria. You can make a case about the Bundesliga not being, one of the top strongest leagues in Europe, but his stats are pretty similar whether he's played in the Champions League, in the Bundesliga here in Austria, in the national team, and almost to a certain extent in his limited time at Liverpool, the game time, it still sort of holds up on that statistical ratio. So he's proven that he's a good goal scorer, he's a good assist provider, and he's a very talented, creative player.
Yeah, I spoke actually to his former manager, Jesse Marsh, last summer, and he kind of said that his best position was maybe as a number 8 or maybe as a false 9. We've kind of seen him more off the left for Liverpool. What do you think his best position is, and where did he play most frequently when he was at Salzburg?
Well, I think he's got the talent to play in either of those positions, really. I mean, you saw, I guess Liverpool fans would have seen in the Champions League against Liverpool how he sort of ran down the flanks and really exploited space in that Champions League game at Anfield a couple of seasons back. But then more often he was switched into the centre in a way for Salzburg. They like to play these balls into the players in that sort of false 9 position. And he was great at this quick passing. It was the vision for a quick pass that made him the perfect player in that false 9. So you'd knock it into him somewhere around about the D. And even if he was marked up by 3 or 4 players, he'd often be able to find a way to just squeeze a ball through into the penalty area and just set up a colleague for either a dangerous attacking cross or a direct chance in on goal. And that's how he created a lot of danger. So I'd wager that with Minamino, there were also a lot of, hockey assists, as you'd call it, these sort of second assists as well, where he provided the assist for the assist provider.
When he moved to Liverpool, did you think it was a move that stylistically made sense? Was it one that you thought, yeah, I can kind of see him fitting in there?
I think definitely there's always that case with Salzburg, the way they play this quick pressing football. I know there's a lot of different types of press, and in fact, tons of teams play a press of some kind these days. So it's not just as simple as saying, oh yeah, he plays from one pressing team, he'll fit in another pressing team. But there definitely seem to be sort of philosophical similarities with the way that the Klopp sets up and the way that Marsh had his Salzburg side set up. And Minamino had experienced a few different sort of setups at Salzburg, but they all had that in common. So it seemed like a move. I know sometimes we see players go, perhaps when they move to the Premier League, you move, maybe a young player moves to a Chelsea or whatever, and you think, why they're moving there? They're not going to get any game time. I don't think we had that feeling when Minamino moved to Liverpool that it was kind of going to be a waste of his talents or going to be a move that was a dead end for him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the big issues for him within English football has almost been the physicality of it. Do you think that's a fair assessment of what we've seen so far? And I'm guessing maybe in Austria you didn't quite have that same issue.
I think that is fair to say. The Premier League is famous for that type of football and the type of players you come up against. There are the Austrian Bundesliga, for all its improvements, it's getting a lot better. You can't say that the Bundesliga defending is the same quality as the Premier League defending. It simply isn't. So, of course, it was always going to be a big step up for Takumi Minamino. But then I think at the same time, it's almost, to keep things in perspective a little bit, it's quite difficult in football that when you sign a player for a bargain, as Liverpool did with Minamino, any expectation of him sort of becoming a first name on the team sheet or becoming very, very regularly in the starting 11 was perhaps even unrealistic. And I'm sure that Klopp is not even really that worried about his progress, maybe because he's shown signs at Liverpool. Putting him out on loan was probably a good option as well. And it's not like he's been completely lost there or not being able to sort of make any impact at all. I think it's just the simple fact that it takes time to adjust, it takes time to develop. And Minamino probably was not signed as somebody who was designed to get 90 minutes every weekend.
Yeah, you mentioned the sort of adjustment there, and I think it's important to mention that, particularly at the moment we're in a pandemic still, he's not really been able to adjust to living in a new country particularly easily. He's kind of a shy character from what I gather as well. He's not somebody who's big and outgoing and that sort of thing. I think the two of those things together must have made it incredibly difficult to move from Austria to England, try and settle. It can't have been easy for him, can it?
No, I think that's quite a sympathetic viewpoint, and I think it's fair to take that because we do forget these days, that these are young guys, and I think especially if you move from South America or potentially moving from Asia, as in Minamino's case, it's not easy just simply to adjust to, plying your trades. You're making a career in a completely different country in a very high pressure environment. And yeah, of course, as a top level footballer, you've got to be able to deal with that, but it doesn't make it any easier. And it doesn't mean that everybody can handle it. And I know at Salzburg, they're very sensitive with these things. They've got a scouting network. It's widely regarded as being the best scouting network in the whole world, in fact. And they've got scouts in South America, in Africa, in Asia. And they also have a really good sort of method of bedding players into Europe. That's what Liefering, the feeder club, does, and that's what Salzburg do. They give players this time to adjust in Europe, simply, not just on a footballing level, but on a personal level. And they do everything else that comes with that. The Japanese staff at Salzburg are there. You've got your interpreters, you've got everybody you need. It's not like he'll be isolated, particularly at Liverpool, but it's easy to feel that way when suddenly you go from a club where you have Japanese teammates, you have a Japanese staff set, and you've got the sort of Japanese media here, the ones that the Japanese players know quite well. And then it is another new adjustment to move to the Premier League, and hopefully it's one that he can make and sort of feel comfortable and enjoy himself too, because surely that's the best the best conditions for him to enjoy his football and play well.
Is he a player, do you think, that relies a lot on confidence? I think the best we've probably seen of him in a Liverpool shirt is that Crystal Palace game last season, the 7-0. He scored the first goal in that, and you could see visibly the rest of that game. He played a lot better off the back of that. Is that a fair thing to say, do you think? He really does need that kind of injection of confidence?
I mean, I could only speculate, really, but I think, for a player like Minamino, it probably is quite a big deal. In Salzburg, you've got this winning mentality. Everybody is used to it. It's a culture of winning. They go into every game knowing that these guys are the best in the country. They're going to win the game. They're going to win the league. No matter how much they're challenged, they've got that sort of self-belief behind them. And I think when you move to the Premier League, or when a Bundesliga player here moves to any of the other leagues, the German Bundesliga, Serie A, whatever, they probably do need some sort of self-assurance. When you get a few goals, a few sort of calls up to the starting 11, just something behind you to sort of reaffirm it for yourself that you're good enough, that you've answered your critics. There's a lot of pressure on you when you move up, and people saying, "Are you good enough? Can you do it from the Austrian Bundesliga?" Or the Austrian Bundesliga is a farmers' league or whatever. I think it probably does need a few goals and a good spell, really, maybe more than just one game or a couple of goals here or there, for you to really look at yourself and say, "Hey, I am good enough to do this," and answer the questions for Minamino himself rather than just for the critics too. So I think a good run, the loan spell was a good idea, and getting him a bit more game time and a bit more confidence is definitely something useful for him, I think.
From how I understand it, I think once Jesse Marsh came into Red Bull Salzburg, that was really when we saw Takumi take a next step over there. I mean, firstly, would that be a fair thing to say? And secondly, how much of an influence do you think Jesse Marsh was on Takumi Minamino? Yeah,
Jesse Marsh is known for, he's very well respected and very well liked by the players at Red Bull Salzburg. Everybody said that on a personal man management level, he was a real step up for them, and they really enjoyed working with him in that sense. So that was almost one of his biggest things. His results in Salzburg as a coach were pretty much as you'd expect. That they were good, they were solid, but they were not a massive step up from the Red Bull Salzburg sides we've seen in the past. But the feedback from the players almost is what cemented Marsh's reputation here. So I have no reason to expect that was any different for Minamino in his case. I don't know exactly the nature of their relationship, but as you said, Minamino's fairly shy. Didn't speak to the media too much, so we didn't hear too many interviews about him sort of praising Marsh openly. But he looked very comfortable and he played. Yeah, he was very, very dangerous in his time at Salzburg. Sorry, actually, that was sort of the second part of your question. I can't remember what the first bit was.
Neither can I, to be honest. But we'll move on. Yeah, there's kind of been a couple of sort of links with sort of an exit from Liverpool, and obviously we know that Jesse Marsh is moving to Leipzig. It kind of makes a little bit of sense to me that maybe Leipzig might be interested in him. I don't know whether you sort of would agree with that from what you know of the pair over in Austria. I think if he was to leave and try and get his career back on track, it maybe could make a little bit of sense.
I certainly couldn't deny that. You know, the links are very strong. No matter what they say, the two clubs will always have this relationship. You know, there's been so many players over the years that have gone directly from Salzburg to Leipzig, and I say over the years, I mean really in the last decade. So that those figures are only increasing year on year. So I suppose, in a way, the only thing I think that would put Minamino off a Leipzig move would be, it would almost be an admission of failure in that sense, that he would move away from the Premier League, and it would be like kind of going back towards a comfort zone, which, you know, in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. But I think sticking it out at Liverpool, if possible, would be a good option for him. You know, I hope he can do that, and I hope he can break through there. And as I said at the beginning of the interview, really, I think it's easy to forget that, you know, a good top Premier League side like Liverpool, you need more than 11 really, really good players. And if you've got the player with the attacking quality of Minamino, the passes that he can pick, the dribbling, the runs he can make on the ball, if a player like that is your third choice and you can keep him happy and make him feel like he's improving for a year or 18 months or so, then, you know, that's how you form a very strong Premier League squad, really. So I hope that he can stick it out there.
Yeah, definitely. Just lastly on Minamino, before we move on to Patson Daka, I mean, he's obviously moved straight from Salzburg to Liverpool. Did he almost miss a step there? Would it have been better for him to go to Leipzig first and then to Liverpool? Did he make it a too big a jump, I suppose, is the question I'm asking.
That's a really good question. I mean, it's always hard to say that, and everything is results based these days. So if he does move on to Leipzig, then maybe you can say that he missed a step. But I think at the time it was the right move, and I don't think there was anything. You know, I don't think there were any huge alarm bells as to why he shouldn't have made that move necessarily. But I think when you look at the ambition and the pressure that's on at Leipzig these days, you know, RB Leipzig are probably going into each season now as the main contenders to Bayern in the Champions League. Sorry, in the German Bundesliga, and in the Champions League, they're pushing to win it. You know, Leipzig's aim at the start of the season these days would be to get to the final or to win the Champions League. So, in some senses, other than the fact that the German Bundesliga is not quite as highly regarded as the Premier League, you know, of course they're sort of top 2, 3, 4 leagues in the world in terms of their reputation, but I think the step down from Liverpool to Leipzig in terms of club stature, there is a difference in terms of that, the sort of history and stature, of course, between the clubs. But in terms of the pressure that's on and the quality of football that's being played, I don't think it's a huge difference. I don't think you could say really that Leipzig is a stepping stone these days to a club like Liverpool. I think it's, you know, the ambitions and the goals would be pretty similar.
Yeah, it'd certainly be interesting to see what happens with Minamino this summer. If a big enough offer was to be put on the table, I do wonder whether Liverpool might be just tempted to take it. But if they were to lose him, they would then have to bring in another body, as you mentioned before, to kind of replace him within the squad. Patson Daka is being linked with Liverpool extensively at the moment. And I have to be honest, he's not a player that I've seen a great deal of, to be fair. I mean, how good a player is Patson Daka, Tom? And what sort of style does he have as a footballer?
I mean, the truth is he's looked fantastic in the Austrian Bundesliga. Again, with that caveat, in the Austrian Bundesliga, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And the truth is you never really know how a player is going to go when they develop from this league. I think the Austrian Bundesliga in the last 10, 12 years or so has moved up from, you know, it's a big difference between being around sort of 18th to the 20th best league in Europe to the sort of 7th to 10th best league. That is a big difference. And there's a lot of comparable leagues where people would probably think these leagues are much stronger than Austria, but actually in the coefficient, things like the Eredivisie in Holland have been below the Austrian league in recent years. So it is a strong league, and Daka's incredible goal scoring form in the Austrian Bundesliga do suggest that he has all the tools. He's got the capability of making it at a bigger club, at a bigger league. You never know until it happens. But the only thing that we've really missed from Patson Daka is this real run in the Champions League. Salzburg have had some good games in the Champions League over the past few years. I mean, Liverpool have seen it firsthand. They can attack brilliantly, but the defence in the Champions League has always cost has always cost Salzburg a lot in these ultimate group stage exits each year for the last couple of seasons. And so Daka, with his injury this year, he missed a large part of Salzburg's Champions League campaign and never really sunk his teeth into the Champions League in the season just gone by. So I think that's the main thing that he's missing, is that he hasn't really demonstrated his ability on that European stage yet.
Do you think that would be enough to put off potential suitors? I think it's 34 goals, 12 assists in about 42 games last season. But as you say, none of them in the Champions League or the Europa League. It kind of feels like a bit of a missing box that he needs to tick before he moves on to a Liverpool or a team of that kind of stature.
Yeah, it does a little bit. And I'm disappointed with Salzburg, the fact that going out of the Champions League each year, that's to be expected. And they finished third in each of their groups, which have been really tough groups. Atletico Madrid, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, huge teams that they've played against. But then when they've dropped down into the Europa League, we've been thinking, great, what a chance now for players like Daka to establish themselves in European football, maybe a run to the semis, run to the finals for Salzburg. And they've gone out on the first occasion at both times in the last two years. Hard draws, in fairness, but it has stopped players like Daka picking up a lot of European experience. So on the one hand, yes, I think that will factor into people's decision making, that he's only got the Austrian Bundesliga to really be analysed. But at the same time, I think that's offset a little bit by the fact that when you sign a player from Salzburg, the cost is just so low in comparison to what people are talking about when you talk about some established players in established leagues. The fees are so different. I mean, we saw that the Minamino fee was incredibly low. It was almost nothing for a Premier League side, and Daka would be worth considerably more at this point in time. But at the same time, the transfer fee would be very low. So in essence, it's quite a low risk move for somebody like Daka. And when he's scored as many goals as he has, then it might just be worth it anyway.
I suppose the one thing he does have in his favour is that he's successfully filled the Erling Haaland void, which is certainly a big one. How do they compare, do you think? I'm sure Haaland is a much better player. He's got a higher ceiling, but is there a comparison to be made in terms of the Salzburg thing?
I think the Haaland thing is it's a difficult one, because in a way, Patson Daka had only one job and he had one responsibility, and that was to fill in to the shoes of Erling Haaland, which is no easy task. And, when Haaland is then immediately leaving the Austrian Bundesliga and making headlines around world football, such an exciting talent since, in Austria as well, but since he's left Austria, the pressure on Daka to actually replicate that. He's a young guy, he's a shy guy, he's a sort of a quietly spoken guy. You did wonder whether, given that he's sort of character-wise kind of a polar opposite to Haaland, whether it would work out. Haaland's got this brash style. He's very bold, and I think Haaland had this X factor that we really could see. He's got that extra thing that just makes him special. And you look at the way he plays football, it seems like once he gets into a penalty area, he's a guy who can do anything. And he's young and he's got massive self-confidence. And as you say, his ceiling looks absolutely huge. I'm not sure if it's the same for Daka, but at this point in the comparison, he's done everything that could have possibly been asked of him. His goal records in the Austrian Bundesliga for the last two seasons have been exemplary. You can always rely on Patson Daka. It's basically a cheat code in the Austrian Bundesliga fantasy football this year, which is something which, I don't do that very seriously, but I do stick together a fantasy football team here in Austria. And you're a fool if you don't just leave Daka as your captain, because you're pretty much guaranteed he's going to get a goal, maybe two every week. Doesn't get too many assists. He's more a sort of an out-and-out centre forward rather than a player like Haaland, who you feel like once he's in the box, he's just going to knock everybody out of the way, whether he's got the ball at his feet or whether he's going for a header. It's a bit different with Daka, but his finishing is fantastic. His vision to run, his runs over the top, his runs in behind the defence are lightning fast and timed well and are very, very accurate. And that's been a complete recipe for success in Austria. So if, on that alone, he's got to be a dangerous opponent in any league, really. And with a bit of coaching, a bit of training to adjust to a new league, I think Daka could still be a very, very dangerous weapon, even if he's not so much of a sort of an all-around threat as Holland is.
Has he ever played out wide, Patson Daka, or is he just purely a central striker?
Certainly his main position has been the central striker. If he has been out wide, it's just been in sort of tactical variations when Jesse Marsh has been trying to mix things up and make use of Daka's pace in a little switch. But for the most part, he's deployed straight down the middle, and it really suits the way Salzburg play football. They've got this sort of win the ball back and go forward as quickly as you can and overwhelm the opposition with immediate football. And yeah, he's the perfect player for that, because Salzburg can be defending. Daka's lurking around the centre spot, and lo and behold, literally 3 or 4 seconds later, he's got the ball in the back of the net. So it's very much down the middle for Salzburg and for Daka.
Do you know why there's not really been any links again with Leipzig for him? I mean, the way that you describe him there, he almost sounds a little bit Timo Werner-ish in that he can sort of get in behind, finish well. Maybe not finish well for Timo Werner this season, but certainly in previous seasons. It kind of strikes me as an obvious one that Leipzig might have been interested in him. It
could be, and still, I wouldn't be surprised if these rumours do suddenly start to come around and we do end up seeing a shock transfer for Daka to Leipzig one day. But the gut feeling is that he will move on this summer, whenever that may be, before the new season. I think when it comes to Leipzig, the fact that they've just taken Szoboszlai, the Hungarian sort of Salzburg's star player, and in recent years they've taken so many now, and they are trying to sort of establish a difference. Since both teams are now in UEFA competitions, they've had to sort of scale back the nature of the relationship between Salzburg and Leipzig. They've had to operate sort of officially as different entities, different businesses. And you just wonder if it's almost too obvious if sort of every good Salzburg player coming through goes directly to Leipzig. And we saw what happened with Haaland. I wonder if the sort of Red Bull bosses are feeling a bit sick that Haaland is the one who didn't go to Leipzig. But at the same time, it did so much for the reputation of Salzburg, the fact that Haaland didn't stay sort of in-house, as it were, and went off elsewhere and forged a reputation for himself outside. I think that brought a lot more focus to Salzburg and a lot more attention to Salzburg, where these players are coming from. And I just think they're trying to relax it a little bit and not make it the first option for every new signing.
Yeah, certainly one to watch out for, whether it's Minamino or Patson Daka or one of the other many links between Salzburg and Liverpool. The Red Bull relationship is unlikely to be stopping anytime soon, I think. But certainly on Blood Red, it's something we'll keep an eye out for. But that's all we have time for on the latest Blood Red podcast. Thank you so much to Tom for joining me, the other Bundesliga podcast. I'm sure well worth your time checking out. Tom, thanks for your time. Appreciate the insight.
Thanks a lot for having me. Cheers.
No problem at all. From both of us, until next time, it's goodbye for now.